What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Pelk Talk. Today I talked to the absolute legend, Paul Carcaterra. Paul played lacrosse at Syracuse and won a national championship in 1995. Paul's been a staple for college lacrosse broadcasting for the past 10 years. He's just that guy. An hour long, and I cannot wait for you guys to listen to what Paul's got to say. You can also listen as a podcast on the Apple Podcast app, Google, and Spotify. Now, enjoy. What's up, guys? Mitch Pelkey back again with another episode of Pelk Talk. Today, joined by the legend, Paul Carcaterra.
Legend.
Paul,
I like this, man. We're pumping tires. Pumping tires.
Yes, sir. How you doing, Paul?
I'm good, man. I'm hanging in. I've had my days during this quarantine. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not one of these guys who sugarcoats it. I've had some peaks. I've had some valleys. I've found some hidden gold and treasures, and then I've stared at the wall, going stir crazy.
You sick of it yet?
Yeah, I am. Look, I'm a very positive, optimistic type person who tries to find some silver linings, and there's been a lot of good in this. I think for humanity, we've been able to take a step back and really kind of hone in on some relationships and spend some time with some people, whether it's virtually, on the phone, connecting with your family more. There's some good stuff here, but at the end of the day, we're all like driven people who like to get stuff done and like to be around people physically. So I think that's the part that I struggle with the most.
Yeah, sweet. Let's dive right into it. Start from the beginning. Growing up in Yorktown, New York.
Yeah.
Hotbed for lacrosse. What was that like?
Man, it was awesome. It was like something out of like out of a documentary. If you watched, something from Canada, hockey related, or Texas football, or Indiana hoops, Yorktown had that vibe. Like, it was so cool, Mitch. And I'll tell you why. Because when I was a little kid, my parents grew up in New York City. My dad was like an old school Italian guy. Who wasn't really involved in sports too much. One of those guys who never missed a dinner with his mom on Sundays, even as he got older. Yeah, just old
the same
school.
way.
Yeah,
my mom's the same exact way.
Yeah, so old school. You get it, man. My dad's name's Lorenzo, and I have uncles named Carmine, Frankie, Joey, and Fonzo. So like that side was super, super Italian. And then my mom actually is 100% Irish and was born in England, and she moved over to the States when she was really little. So they met in the Bronx at like 14. It was my mom's only boyfriend in her life was my dad. My dad's only girlfriend was my mom. And then they ended up moving upstate to a town called Yorktown, and they had no clue about this lacrosse crazy type community, which obviously benefited me. It benefited my brothers, and we had a like built-in culture of like driving to be great and wanting to be around lacrosse 24/7. And we didn't have like so many things at our disposal back then, Mitch. It was different. Like, we didn't have summer travel lacrosse. Like, we were in the backyard playing all the time and just like making up games on the fly, but the stick was in our hands all the time, which was really cool. And we became really creative and really didn't think of the game like in a box. But the thing that I think separated that town was I was always into pro sports. I watched a lot of football and hoops and hockey, and I'd watch anything. But my idols actually were Yorktown lacrosse players, like guys that were 10 years older than me. I was a ball boy for the team when I was in 5th grade. And like, I would look up to these guys who were going off to Johns Hopkins and Syracuse. And like, that's who I wanted to be. I didn't want to be like Joe Montana or John Elway or any pro basketball player. As much as I loved Michael Jordan, I was realistic. I wasn't going to be an NBA hoops player.
Yeah.
But I didn't even want to be. Honestly, like, if you asked me a question when I was in 5th grade, do you want to be a Division I college lacrosse star, or do you want to be a professional athlete in the NBA or the NFL? I wouldn't have hesitated for a second. I wanted to play lacrosse, and
Really?
the community of Yorktown did that. Yeah, for sure.
That's cool to hear. I like that. So you hit on that your dad is Italian and my mom's Italian. I don't think the fans honestly realize what that's like with the Sunday dinners being like a 10-course meal. What was it like for you growing up? Was it Sundays or full-time family days?
100%. So my grandmother, Mary, my dad's mom, she was like 4'11", and my dad was a school teacher in the South Bronx for 32 years. He was such a mama's boy that like on Friday after school, he would drive right to his mom's apartment in the Bronx, pick her up, bring her up north to Yorktown for the weekend. She would like cook all weekend. And we'd eat a ton on Saturday, we'd eat a ton on Sunday, and we'd eat these early dinners on Sunday. And I remember my grandmother would just literally make like an extra pot of sauce and meatballs. Keep it, not even put it in Tupperware. Keep it in the saucepan, in the pot, and put it in the fridge. We were just savages, and all week we would just attack the meatballs and
leftovers.
We'd always say, Grandma, like as we got bigger, we're like, Grandma, you gotta make more. She's like, I'll do it. Like she could hardly even see the top of the saucepan. It was classic. But yeah, those dinners were. I had my uncle Carmine. This guy was so old school, man. He had a black Cadillac, and he'd wear a fedora, and in the summertime, he would just wear the white tank top T-shirt, right? Yeah, and then he would drive up into Yorktown.
One hand on the wheel.
One hand on the wheel on a black Cadillac, and literally he had a dog named Missy, a little Chihuahua, on his shoulder while he was driving. I can't make this stuff up, man. This is fact.
I like that. It reminds me of my family a lot. So you hit on growing up that you were a big lacrosse player. Did you play any other sports?
I played football most of my life up until I think sophomore year in high school. I had a cyst in my left arm and my left humerus, which was like hollow, and I kept breaking that. I broke it like 3 times before the end of 10th grade. So I stopped playing football. I wish I didn't have to stop playing football, but I love lacrosse so much that I just didn't want to miss out on any opportunity to play in the spring. And I think the big difference for me was I was like sleigh riding my sophomore year in that winter, and I broke my arm again. And then we had lacrosse tryouts for varsity. Back then, like a lot of freshmen didn't play varsity. It wasn't even a given for sophomores. It was just a different era. If you were at a higher level sophomore year, maybe you'd get a shot to try out. So I tried out and I made the team, but like I physically just wasn't there, and I just didn't want to have that kind of injury again. And I was small too. As a sophomore, I was 135 pounds. Wow. I was getting tooled around in terms of just my physical strength wasn't there, and I had the busted arm. So that was just, for me, it was a priority just to kind of shut everything else down. It wasn't because I had like this single sports mind. All my buddies were playing football and I missed it.
So you said you attended Yorktown High School. What kind of moment was like that for you? Like were you like, oh, like this is it. This is my time to show with Yorktown being a real legacy for lacrosse?
Yeah. So my sophomore year, we won the state championship. My junior year, we won the state championship, and my senior year. Mm-hmm. So we won 3 state championships in a row. And that was cool. It was the only time that's ever happened in Yorktown where there's been back-to-back, let alone a three-peat. So being part of that was super cool. And we just had so many guys on our team. The competition in practice was it was harder than games because we had all these dudes who were, our defense. My sophomore year, we had a guy who went to Loyola and started as a freshman. We had a first-team All-American who went to Johns Hopkins. We had a first-team All-American long-stick midfielder who went to Loyola as well. We had a 4-year starter at Georgetown. So, then we had another guy from Maryland who started for 4 years. We had 5 guys who were, 4-year starters at big-time Division I schools. So we're going against these guys in practice every day, and not to be disrespectful for some of the teams we played against. Back then it was different, too. It's like you were either a good team or, you started lacrosse in 9th grade back where we were, and you got exposed and you were a bunch of scrubs, right? Just because you didn't have the history of playing when you were in 3rd, 4th grade, and we'd run roughshod on those guys, and it was just because the practices were just so competitive that you almost looked at game time as an opportunity to really shine and have fun, and that was awesome. But for me, I just matured differently too. I mean, I think I always had a pretty good stick. But my sophomore year, like I said, I was so small. I was like feeble. I wasn't, I was coming off that broken arm. I was 135 pounds, and I had a decent year and scored some goals. But that next year, I think I gained like 30 pounds. And then by my senior year, it was 185 pounds. I'll never forget. There was a guy my sophomore year on the team who was really tooling on me in practice, just physically beating me up. And he was a good player. He went off to play Division I lacrosse. And I just remember like just feeling him like physically. I was like, oh my God, like I'm not ready for this. And I'll never forget, we had like an alumni game right after my senior year in high school. And I was 185 pounds. And then I started lifting and I was stronger. And like, he was guarding me, and it was like kind of like one of those moments that like hit me. I'm like, wow, man, like I'm a man now. I'm gonna take this guy to the rack. And I remember like flipping the script and like physically, I kind of abused him. And that had a lot to do with me just growing and getting stronger. And it was a really cool moment for me because I think I needed that too, because I looked at like that 3-year journey of playing on those teams. In my sophomore year, I physically wasn't there just because I went through puberty late and just wasn't ready. And, to get that right before college, it gave me confidence. And I started buying into working out harder and lifting. But when we lifted back then, dude, it was totally different. Like literally, like you show up, you do bench press, do some curls, maybe do some squats. But, no one really knew. Like the stuff I know as a 44-year-old, compared to what I knew as an 18-year-old. I mean, ask your dad next time what his workout regimens look like. Nothing like what you're doing at Ohio State. Yeah, I mean, everyone, like, if you don't have a six-pack in college now, you're kind of like a joke, right? Like, if you're in the locker room, like, someone doesn't have a six-pack, it's like, what's up with this guy?
We're busting on him for sure.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy you tell that story. I was talking to Rob Pinnell last week, and he had a kind of a similar story, his body didn't kind of mature till late in his high school career and ended up taking that PG year at Deerfield. And he was like, I think I was there stick work wise, but body weight and mature wise, I wasn't. So that's why I had to take that PG year.
Yeah. I mean, look, everyone matures differently, but back then, and I think it's going back to that. Like you fell into a different recruiting life cycle. When did you commit to Ohio State? Like 9th grade?
Yeah, fall of my freshman year.
Yeah, fall of your freshman year. I think it's going back to what it used to be, closer to when I was in high school. I think the recruiting has kind of had some peaks and valleys as well, and I think coaches are learning from that. And then obviously the NCAA has some rules and regulations that have forced people to go later. But if someone recruited me off my freshman year, dude, I was 110 pounds. Like no one would have taken me. Like that's just the reality of it. So. Knock on wood, I was in high school in the 90s. I mean, I wish I was young again, but,
Yeah. Are you glad the recruiting rules have changed?
Yeah, I am. I think they're at a good spot now. It's almost like a happy medium for the coaches because I think they get a couple years now to look at kids. I think September 1st of the junior year is totally acceptable. I mean, the kid has 2 more years of high school. I think that's early enough. But I also think it's fair too. I think, the old rules just put so much pressure on kids, man. It wasn't just about like not finding the right guys and hedging bets on guys who are so young. It was more the pressure of a young kid. Like an 8th grader should not have in the back of his mind that in the next year he's going to be making decisions about college. But you can't fault the kid either because like, what is he going to do? Just sit out and be like, yo, I'm not playing this game, right? Like, Ohio State can contact me, Duke, Carolina. I'm going to tell them, yo, I'll talk to you in a few years. It doesn't work that way. So they were kind of at the mercy of the system, and the coaches were at the mercy of it too. So like no one was really at fault. Coaches had to do it because other coaches in that community and their peers were doing it. Kids had to do it because they didn't want to miss out on an opportunity. But now we're in a different dilemma now too with this virus. I mean, if you're like a 2022 kid who just finished your sophomore year or would have finished your sophomore year, this summer was supposed to be like massive for you. So now you have no spring season potentially in the way that it's trending. You probably, won't have a summer unless things change. And I hope they do. I mean, no one wants to see kids on the field safely more than me. I want to see sports and I want to see lacrosse back ASAP, but we're going to have to do it in a safe manner. And, I'm not overly confident that a lacrosse kid is going to be on the field in the next few weeks. You probably aren't either. So if you're a 2022, this was your year.
Yeah.
They hit the pause button. So that group might be delayed another year. Like, coaches are going to want to see these kids play, right? Like, you didn't see them in the spring, and you might not see them in the summer. So it's tough.
Yeah, and you talk about pressure. I mean, I remember when I was going through the whole recruiting process, 14 years old, that summer going into ninth grade, every weekend is just a tournament with college coaches, and it was just like so much pressure. And if you messed
looking
up,
on
you're
the
like,
sideline, like how
yeah.
many times, be honest, did you go in the car like feeling like you were on top of the world, or like, man, I blew it? Like, let's be honest. You probably had those days. Yeah.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have been thinking about that, man. You should have been thinking about, like, the first high school kiss you were going to have.
Yeah. But it's like funny when you look out now, because like when you go to Vail or the Placid tournament with these guys and you look back on the memories, and it's just like, in the moment it was so much pressure, but now it's like you've gained so many friendships through the process.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that's the beauty of lacrosse too. Like, I always tell people, like, when I think about my experience from the day I picked up a stick till now, it's the relationships, man. Like, it's the people in the locker room who made you laugh and who made you feel a certain way. Like, I don't care how many goals you scored. I don't care how many assists you had. That meant nothing to me. Like, it's all about, like, the teammates and the players who made you feel good, made you feel part of the team. Like, I always remember, like, as a freshman, those guys who treated me really well, who were seniors. Like, I aspired to be like them and to treat the kid like the last kid on the team who's a walk-on. A funny story of mine was one of my best friends in college, this kid Chris McCartan. He was a freshman. He was from Buffalo. He tried out for the team as a walk-on. When I tell you, Mitch, he was an awful attackman. Like, he was so bad, so bad. But he had, like, big, strong legs. He was a volleyball player in high school, and, like, dude, the dude was big. He was like 205 with monster, like, back then, like, Saquon Barkley type quads. He just was popping out of the seams. Horrendous lacrosse player. Like, to the point where, like, he would take a shot and he would almost take, like, 2 bounces before the goalie. And, they cut him, and they had to. It was like you almost felt bad for the kid from the standpoint, like, dude, like, it's time to go, man. This is tough to watch. So he ended up being in my class my freshman year. And I'll never forget, he came up to me, like, we were in, like, a geology recitation, a small group. And I didn't know him because he didn't stay on the team and he wasn't recruited, so he wasn't living with the other freshmen who were on the team. And he came up to me after. He's like, hey, man, like, I really want to play. I'm like, so what are you thinking? He's like, I don't know. Do you think I should talk to Coach Simmons and ask for another tryout? I'm like, dude, to be quite honest with you, you're a really big, strong kid. You should try to be a defenseman. He's like, oh, really? He's like, I've never played defense. I'm like, yo, I'm gonna work on getting you a shaft. I ended up getting him a shaft, a long pole from, like, the equipment manager or found it somewhere. I don't even know where it came out. I gave him one of my old heads too, because his head was hot garbage. It was awful. It was terribly strung. We were using leather back then too. Yeah. So I show up to class, like, the next week. I give him this stick, starts playing with it. He gets in touch with Coach Simmons, who's the best guy in the history of coaches. Gives him another shot. He ends up making the team. Struggles a lot just because he's not used to it, but he buys into it. By his sophomore year, he starts, like, really turning the corner. And then his junior year, he's a starting LSM, and his senior year, he's a captain. Like, to me, that's one of, like, my proudest things at Syracuse. It's not like being an All-American and winning a national championship or scoring X amount of goals. It's like, I kind of believed in this dude early, and, like, we just had this friendship that developed, and he ended up being one of my best friends, and we lived together my senior year, and he's still a guy that I talk to all the time. That's what it's all about for me.
That's awesome. So going back to the recruiting process, what was it like for you? Obviously with no travel ball, like, how did you kind of get seen by these Division I schools?
So at Yorktown, we had some success. So we would play, like, late into the state playoffs, into, like, the, first and second week of June. And all the college recruiters would come and watch those state playoff games because you were watching, like, the best teams in New York play each other. The seniors were spoken for, and everyone knew where they were going. But every other kid under that senior class was recruitable because no one was recruiting like sophomores or freshmen then. So if you played on a team that was really successful, you got looks. Like you probably had 2 or 3 games that you had to capitalize. So it did put pressure on you from the standpoint that like when you were playing club, I mean, how many club games did you play your 9th grade summer? Probably 30 games, right?
It's terrible, yeah.
Yeah, you could have a mulligan here or there. But, like, I didn't have a chance to have a mulligan. If I had 3 games, I kind of have to shine. And, like, I felt pretty confident and comfortable in my ability. And I kind of, like, I like when I'm put on a spot in life. Like, I would rather call a game like, one college football game that I called this year, Texas played Utah in the Alamo Bowl. I think we got close to 5 million viewers in that game. Like, I would way rather know I'm walking into a game like that, and when the light turns on, it's live, and I got to figure it out. It's easier for me. It grabs my attention. It's something that I can, like, focus on way more when I know the stakes are higher. And I feel like a lot of that's attributed to my childhood and watching these guys when we talk about like Yorktown and watching how they played in like those big moments. I wanted that big moment. So kids were getting recruited that way. And there was also this thing called the Empire State Games where kids would play in a regional summer tournament. So like there'd be like the Hudson Valley area, Long Island, Western New York, Central New York. They all come and play in these Empire State Games, and coaches recruit there as well. But there wasn't a lot of opportunities. And to be honest with you, a lot of it had to do with people endorsing you. I had a couple guys older than me that were at Syracuse that believed in me and told Coach Simmons and Coach Desko about me. And that's kind of how it started as well. And, when I went up there, I knew that was the spot that I wanted to play just because of all those guys that had come before me at Yorktown and Cuse.
Yeah. So when you stepped foot on campus that fall, did it feel like home from the start?
No, definitely not. Like, no, I wish it did. Like, I struggled, man. Like, I struggled mentally because of being from like a small knit town. Like, I was really tight with my grandparents. Like, I saw my grandparents all the time. Like, I was homesick.
That's an Italian thing for sure.
Yeah. Like, it was hard. Dude, I'm not going to lie to you. I even had in the back of my mind for like a short minute, like, man, should I transfer to Hofstra? And
really? Yeah, right
like,
there.
Like, it's like an hour from Yorktown. Hofstra's on Long Island. Like, I thought about that actually for like, I didn't tell anyone. You might be one of the few people I told. I told my mom and dad. My mom and dad were like, "You're crazy. Your dream was always to play big time college lacrosse. Not that Hofstra's not, but to go away and do it." And play for a program like Syracuse. It was tough, but I would say by the spring I was good. It was the fall. Like, you got to understand, man. Syracuse is a city. It's a great city. I love the people up there, but there are some like dreary days. Like, you don't have sun for like 5 months.
Say when Columbus after you get back from winter break, that January and February is brutal.
No, January. How about April, man? You think you're out of the woods? And April's brutal there. It's brutal. It was snowing. I was talking to a boy from Cuse the other day. It was snowing in May there. And the lack of sun, it could kind of wear on you a little bit. And when you're having a bad day, it becomes a disaster of a day.
Yeah.
So I kind of struggled with that. But the communal feel of Syracuse is a lot like Yorktown, man. The team was so close. Like, my favorite parts of the day were like the locker room after practice. I'd hang out in there sometimes, and we didn't have any type of like, I've been in your locker room at Ohio State. That thing is off the charts. Like, yeah. I probably lived there. That thing was bigger than the house I grew up in. But like for me, I loved like going into the locker room after practice, and like we would shower, and like we literally would just like rap with each other for like an hour, make fun of each other, like hit each other, like just doing goofy stuff, putting things in people's lockers, like, so like it felt like Yorktown. So it didn't take me long, but you got to understand, man, Coach Simmons was the coolest coach you could ever imagine. I mean, he was this guy like Mitch. He didn't teach me much X's and O's. And I don't think he taught many people X's and O's stuff. Like, he never like had a timeout and would strategize. Like his timeouts were more like motivational and would put his hand on you and whisper something in your ear. It's like he was really, really powerful. This guy was a sculptor and an artist. So like he's not your normal guy, like coach guy that's going to show up with a whistle and be like, let's go. He would just clap, come in, he'd tell you a story, and then practice would start. And, there were so many competitive people there that he didn't even have to worry about, like, getting practice amped up. And you wanted to win for this guy, too. He was amazing, man. Like, he would empower his players. I'll never forget. Like, my senior year, I was one of the 2 captains on the team, and, like, he used to come up to me, like, during stretching, and I'd be on my butt, like, reaching for my ankles or something. All of a sudden, he'd whisper something into my ear, and he'd say powerful stuff like, they came to watch you to play today, like stuff like that. Like, when a coach tells a college kid that, or you're going to dominate today, he would say that kind of stuff. But it wasn't like it was like in a very like calming press. So you just like felt like, oh my God, man, if my coach believes in me and I know I can make a couple of mistakes, like that's the way he was.
That guy gave you so much power.
Yeah, he was so masterful at like believing in people and making you feel like you belonged, but like you were gonna dominate, you were part of his group, and like he had your back, man. Like there were so many guys who screwed up on our team, and honestly, like a part of him almost like he had a soft spot for the screw ups. Luckily, I didn't get in a ton of trouble. We all get in a little trouble here and there, but at the end of the day, like Coach Simmons, man, you had to do some really, really bad stuff or you were going to get chucked off the team.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that because I was doing my research and on a podcast, you said Coach Simmons is the best coach you've ever had.
Yes.
And then earlier this week, I was talking to Brendan Curry and I asked him what Syracuse lacrosse meant to him. He said Coach Simmons. So what type of impact does he have on people?
He's such an amazing person. So he was a professor at Syracuse too in the arts. Like he had sculpting classes and like he's so well read. Never talks about lacrosse. Like when I go into his office, like we wouldn't talk about lacrosse. He'd have a magazine. He'd be like, hey, bring this home and read it. And it'd be about like African art or his time in South America. That he would spend during the summer. Like he wasn't one of these guys that would watch lacrosse film. Like he didn't believe in that. He was very artistic and he coached players that way. So like when you look at the game and you look at the game at the highest level right now, so like Brendan Curry's dad, Todd, was an amazing lacrosse player. And he got to Cuse, in the early 80s, and he graduated actually in 87. That was actually Gary Gate and Paul Gate's freshman year. So he looped with those guys for 1 year. When Coach Simmons brought in the Gates, that completely changed the game. And I've been following the game like religiously since then. So like I can tell you pretty confidently like that we don't see stuff from the Powells or the Thompsons without the Gates. And Coach Simmons is the architect behind that because like he embraced the fact like no one was running around fields with one hand back in the late 80s. All midfielders had 2 hands, would sweep down the alley. And, if you were a one-handed guy, you were kind of like a grunt guy. But, like, offensive players had 2 hands. They would play down the alley. Everything was from here. Where you had these 2 Canadian brothers. And back then, there weren't Canadian midfielders in college lacrosse. There was a couple of guys that were from Canada that played attack. But, like, you get these horses now, 6'2", 205 pounds. Could have been, like, NFL football players if they grew up in the state of Texas, and they had the craziest stick skills you've ever seen. And now they start jumping behind goals, and Coach Simmons is like pushing them to do it, and they're trying these things in practice. And like that just was his mindset. Like he never put you in a corner or told you had to play a certain way. Like he was incredible, man. Like outside of my dad, he's 100% one of the most influential people in my life, and I still keep in touch with him. I mean, I call a lot of college football games and lacrosse games, and I've been up in the Dome over the years coming back to call these types of games. I always meet up with Coach Simmons. We go out for lunch or breakfast, and a lot of times he's 84 years old. A lot of times, I'll drop him off at his house, and we'll be in his driveway for another 2 hours and just wrap. And like honestly, the 2 hours feels like 5 minutes. So like to have a coach like that, it's not it's not normal. And I just feel like he was above his time in terms of like connecting with humans. He's the kind of guy, like he's a storyteller. I have two kids, and when we go up to like Lake Placid, he would bring like jewelry for my daughter who's 10 now, but like if she was 4, he'd bring her a necklace. Like, who thinks of that stuff?
Yeah. So going back to your freshman year, what was kind of that aha moment that fall your freshman year that you were like, oh, like this isn't high school ball, like I got to kind of step it up? Was there an exact moment that you remember?
Yeah, yeah, I think. Well, it was a period of time. Like I remember like, so when I was in high school, I played with this guy Rob Cavabit, who actually went to Syracuse with me. He was my boy since we were in nursery school. We went to Cuse together, and he was an attackman, and I was an attackman in high school as well. And I played off ball and played the righty wing, and he would feed me. And I would dodge. Anyone could dodge in high school too. I just remember like the fall of my freshman year saying to myself, like, okay, you're a good shooter. Like I had a hard shot. I was one of the hardest shooters on the team. And I remember trying a couple times like to play the high school dodging role and trying to do a little bit of everything. I remember saying to myself, like, this isn't gonna work, man. Like I gotta play to my strengths. I can't try to like be the attackman that can do a little bit of everything. And then I remember establishing my shot even more, and I was getting some reps with the man up my freshman year and in practice, and like the first guy off to jump in there and do those kinds of things. And then I remember like finding a role in the perimeter game more and playing to my strengths. And they actually moved me to midfield, and I was able to play quite a bit from that point on. So I think the fall of my freshman year, I just realized to myself, like, all right, this ain't high school anymore, or like, you're going to get some guy who's going to have a really, really bad approach on you and you could dodge and score. Like, these guys were vicious. Like we had 3 defensemen too, that they literally would come at you so hard to almost to a point where like, I love these guys, but like we had Rick Beardsley, Hans Schmidt, and Chad Smith. And Beardsley's from my hometown. I knew him really well. He's the type of guy that like never stops barking and chirping. But the other 2 guys, you had to earn their respect. And when you were a freshman, they were juniors when I was a freshman, they would come at you and they would hack you late. They would do everything to make you feel uncomfortable, almost to retaliate or to make a scene. And it was actually to the point where it was crazy. And then the following year, their seniors, like Casey Powell came in. He was one of the biggest recruits in the history of Syracuse lacrosse. Dude, man, that guy got beat down every single day in practice by those 2 guys, and he never said a word. And that's the craziest thing, like about the Powells and the Gates and the Thompsons. I've never seen those guys really retaliate. And Casey took it like a man, and he earned their respect. They beat him senseless every day in practice. Like his back would have welts on it, and he was 1 year behind me. We ended up being roommates for a couple of years. I'll just never forget, like, Hans Schmidt and Chad Smith made Casey Powell's freshman fall miserable. Whether he believes it or not, I saw it.
Wow, that's crazy. So graduating Cuse, how did you kind of get into broadcasting? Because you majored in political science.
Yeah, political science. I thought I was going to be a lawyer, which that obviously didn't work out. So I went to Cuse, and the Newhouse broadcasting school is one of the best in the country, along with like Northwestern and a couple other ones. And so many great broadcasters from Cuse. But like, honestly, Mitch, like I went to Cuse to major in lacrosse. Like that's all I cared about. Like
that was everyone back in the day. I feel.
Yeah, you could have given me poli sci. Like, dude, I was there to play lacrosse. I wanted to play for Coach Simmons, and I didn't really think about it. I wish someone like tapped me on the shoulder instead of, one of those times he tapped me on the shoulder. He should have been like, "Go to Newhouse," right? Maybe he should have said that instead of like, you're going to dominate today. So I didn't even like Newhouse. And honestly, I don't think there was a kid on our team in Newhouse. Like those are the smart kids in school. They went to Newhouse. So it didn't even dawn on me. So I graduated from Cuse, and I ended up becoming a teacher and a coach when I was, really young, like 23 years old.
Fox Lane, right?
Yeah, I was teaching and coaching at Fox Lane. And that's the other thing with Coach Simmons, man. He was the best coach I ever played for, but he did not prepare me to be a coach because I had no clue how to do rise and clears. I just knew how to like coach individuals. And I really knew the game in terms of just like some half field schemes for a young guy, but like I really knew how to like tap into a player, right? Like spend time with him to change his game, to tweak him, to push him. That was probably my strength as a young coach. But the full field schemes, I was lost. So I actually had a phys ed teacher in the district who played lacrosse at Springfield, this guy Brian Dalton, who like majored in PE, and like he knew how to ride in clear, and he knew how to put all those kind of schemes in. So he used to come to practice. I ride in clearing at Cuse. I'm not even kidding. Like we literally like 3 middies across. One of you guys has to go down. If one guy goes down, the other two go back. Like that's what it was. So I look over. He's going down. I'm going up. Like it was, we just balanced the field. It wasn't. We didn't spend time on rising clears. We played full field practice every day. So I was totally unprepared to be a coach. And there was a guy from Cuse who was in Newhouse who I knew, who covered the lacrosse team when I was at Cuse. He was at CSTV, which is CBS Sports, as a studio host, and there was a lacrosse analyst position open in 2004, and he recommended me to the person who deals with all the talent. They call me up. They're like, "Hey, do you want to call a lacrosse game?" I'm like, yeah, it sounds great. I've never done it before, but yeah, I'll give it a try. And I did Army Navy 2004. It's my first time ever doing a game, and I actually got to get my hands on that game because I'm sure I was dreadful, and I would try to do everything like great and tons of words. And what I've learned the most in the last 16, 17 years is just like be yourself, but just like breathe, and like less is more, right? So like I was like more is more, right? So I like that was my approach. I was decent enough where the following year they had a full season spot open, and that's before ESPN was really doing a lot of regular season games. And I went in for an audition with like 4 or 5 other dudes, and these guys were they had a lot of credentials too. But like I remember I started really just listening to people that off season that were calling college football and basketball, and their cadence and how they would say things and how they would punch things, and I started really observing that. And I did well enough in the audition to get that spot. And I did like 12 or 13 games. I did the whole season with Joe Beninati, who's a total pro, and he's meticulous. And like this guy is so dedicated to his craft. So my first experience of like preparing for a game was with Joe Beninati. So that's all I knew. So that was the best thing that happened to me as a first year broadcaster on a full season in 2005 was working with Joe, because I watched this guy prepare. I watched how he put in so much time watching tape and doing these things. And, ever since then, I absolutely loved it. And then one of my bosses at the time moved over to ESPN. And then a couple of years later, there were some opportunities for me there. So for this would have been my 11th season lacrosse if we closed it out with ESPN. And it's been awesome. And that kind of led to other opportunities too, because I'm not a trained broadcaster. I'm just learned on the fly and just a lot of reps. And by trying things and doing a lot of, different things within sports, other opportunities opened up outside of lacrosse. I started calling college football games, probably 9 years ago. And that's been awesome too. And I just feel like the more versatile you can be in your craft, the better you are, because opportunities can come when you're least expected. I never asked to do college football. They approached me, "Hey, you think you want to try this?" I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be awesome." And at the end of the day, it's like most businesses, man. It's about hard work. It's about really connecting with people and being confident in who you are, man. Like I'm not trying to be anyone else. I'm trying to be myself. If you hung out with me off camera, I'd be the same way.
Same person. I love that.
I have like a loud Italian type of personality. That's just the way that I grew up, and I don't really care what really anyone says negatively. Like negative noise doesn't bother me. Like if I'm calling a game and someone tweets at me that like I'm muting you, go ahead, mute me, my God. As long as I know I'm working hard, as long as I know I'm respecting the game. And ultimately in college sports, like I'm elevating athletes and telling their stories. The storytelling to me, like, my podcast and the series that I do, all those things are equally, if not more important to me than the actual games, because if I can tell stories when I call games, I'm better equipped to give you, the viewer, a reason to watch, right? Like if I know more about you by a story I told, or having you on like some of these digital series that I do with ESPN, it's easier for me. It's easier for me to give a viewer a reason to root for you. Like that's ultimately what we want to do in college sports. Like give me a reason to root for Mitch Pelkey. Like who is he? Like, so if he is scoring goals, and we know he can score goals, we know he's a great lacrosse player, but your backstory and how you're chasing a career in media and the things that you're doing, like people like to hear that. You humanize before you analyze, to me. Like one of my bosses, John Vasallo, told me that years ago, and to me it's like it's that, and one other thing that I'll tell you is stuck in my mind all the time. Like when I call games, humanizing is more important than analyzing. Like humanize before you analyze. So make someone connect with that person on a human level. And then the other thing too is like when I'm breaking down games, I always try to remind myself to tell the viewer like how and why it happened. Like if you're getting into the X's and O's part, I know you just took an incredible shot, or Trey Leclerc just ripped a 95-mile-an-hour shot right underneath the upper 90. How and why it happened, right? Like what did he do with his feet? Did he do something different from his last shot to the one that he just scored with the goalie, so he gets that guy thinking? Like those are where my brain goes, or how my head spins.
Okay. Yeah, I think as the viewer, you never really think of how much in depth you guys go with it. You know, one thing I really wanted to ask, you know, watching kind of your senior year on YouTube with the games and people broadcasting them, your 1997 senior season, one of the games, I forget, it was some guy in Quint broadcasting. How crazy is that when you were in college, Quint was broadcasting your games, and now you guys are doing it side by side?
You know, it's funny you say that. So like probably 2 or 3 months ago, someone sent me, and you know, this is a good reminder, Mitch, too, because like I want to show the boys this too. That to me was like one of those moments. I'm looking through my phone right now. One of those moments that like kind of hit me in regards to like full circle, right? And
Yeah,
I've worked with Quint now for I worked with Quint for the last 10 years, and it's just crazy. I have the video of him introducing like me, Casey Powell, like they call us the Orange Crush.
There's three.
I have that.
He's got the wrinkly button down on.
And the terrible hair. And the funny thing is, like, they roll some video of me and they show like one of the few lefty goals. Like I probably scored fewer lefty goals than Trey Leclerc has. Like how many lefty goals has Trey Leclerc had?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. I only had a handful. Like I actually have a pretty good left hand. I just didn't feel comfortable, like just the way that I played. I don't know. Standing still, I would never shoot lefty. On the run, I felt comfortable, just the way that the body works and the mechanics. And they were rolling video of me scoring in the Final Four the year before against Princeton, like a lefty jump shot. And I was busting Quint because he sold the crowd on the video or the viewers that I have a big lefty shot. Like, I'm like, yo, Quint, how much tape did you watch? Because, like, the producer and the director gave you that video of me, like, on a package-wise, shooting lefty, so you just assumed, like, come on, man, if you watch tape, you knew I wasn't a lefty.
Oh, lefty, yeah. That's funny. That's crazy how it all worked out. So kind of going to your series here, what would you say is your favorite series you've done? Is it Through the X, relaxing with P. Cark in the car, or cutting hair? What would you say is your favorite?
That's a good question, man. Oof. They're all different. Like if I had to break down, okay, I'll break down something about each. Like the relaxing with P. Cark in the car. A lot of people could be like, yo, Gong Show, whatever. Like he's
I liked it. It was a good idea.
Dude, I loved it. I'll do that 100 times again if I had that opportunity. For me, that idea came on a chairlift in Utah in like December before that next lacrosse season. I'm just like, you know what, man? Like, I love calling games, but I feel like no one tells stories in lacrosse to support our games. Like a game comes on the air, we call it, and it's done. I wanted to add value for halftime for Rollins. And I just said to myself, like, I'm going to do this. Like, I'm going to start telling more stories. Like, I want to know more about a kid, like, you know, where he's from, his family, his background, you know, highs and lows. And I felt like that would be a really cool opportunity. So I started that, and I had guys from Pat Spencer to Ben Reeves to Trevor Baptiste to Rambo and Heacock. And like,
Yeah.
I feel like mission accomplished. Like, all right, we were able to tell a story in a more relaxed atmosphere. Now, I will tell you this too. Some dudes like that I didn't know, they pull into the car and they were like a little freaked out because they were dealing with the camera and dealing with me. And like, you know, they knew that it would go on air. And it was a little bizarre in some ways, but ultimately mission accomplished. And I tried something, and I moved it over to the haircuts because I started seeing a lot of car interviews. And like, to me, I want to do something that's different. So then I struggled, and I said, what am I going to do, man? I did these car ones. I'm like, whoa, I've been cutting hair since I'm in 5th grade. I've cut hundreds of heads. Like I had clippers when I was a little kid. I cut everyone in the neighborhood, the lacrosse players. In college, I cut a lot of hair. So like, I really know how to cut hair. Scissors, everything. It fades, everything. So actually, when I was at Ohio State, I gave Coach Myers a haircut.
Yeah.
So to me, I was like, this is unique. This is cool. I'm going to cut people's hair while I do the interview. So that kind of just happened naturally because I didn't want to do car interviews anymore, just because they were too prevalent. We started seeing them everywhere. But to answer your question, the Relaxing series to me gave me a window into telling stories that could support our game. So that's what was good and made me feel like fulfilled in that light. The podcast to me is like the purest form of telling a story because you're not up against a gun. Like I'm not worried about like, how's the edit going to be? Like, that's a great answer. Can you say that again? Like, how weird is it? It's like, yo, that was awesome, but like, can you say it again? And then I have to sit there and like, yo, you know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
So like the podcast to me, like, is the purest form of a conversation in a long form storytelling type atmosphere. And I love that. Like, I'm not against the gun. If a podcast, I always try to get them kind of in an hour range. If it goes an hour and 10, so be it. If it's 43 minutes, so be it. I want to tell the story. I have a few things in mind that I really want to get to, but at the end of the day, I want that person speaking. The fewer words I have in questions, oftentimes the better the answers are, right? If I just tell you, like, if I knew you had a moment in time in your life that was so hard, I'm not gonna like make this question so robust and then ask it. I'm just gonna really just honestly say, like, if we just call it item X for argument's sake, like, describe what was going through your mind during item X, right? Like, and I let you talk. So I love the podcast in that way. The Through X stuff is super cool because it allows, I think, kind of a combination of on-field and story, right? Like you have a person that's being introduced. He has a ridiculous skill set, but you're also intertwining it with his story and what he means to not only that program, but the bigger picture of college lacrosse. So that's super cool too. And you know, when the quarantine hit, I wasn't going to sit home and do nothing, man. I can't. So I started this, 4 quarters with Carc. And to me, that's just that's like a quicker way to get to know people. And it's fun. And I think that everyone walks away just knowing a little bit more about a person. Like I did one last week that aired with Sergio Perkovic. I realized, like, all right, this dude's a model, and he's obviously really proud to be a model. And I think that's super cool because the pictures he sent me were like real model pictures, right? Like he had like he was all in. So I thought it was super cool, man. I'm into people that are comfortable in their own skin, are confident, and are proud of what they do. And, whether it's Sergio Perkovic or, Coach Amplo, did a piece with him that's airing this week. He's the Navy coach. I thought it was so cool about how he got acclimated into like Navy life, right? Like here's a guy that's like a Italian guy from Long Island who never had any service experience at all. And he's telling stories about he's saluting the wrong people the first day on campus, and the assistant coach is throwing up when they're on a fighter jet type tour, and just little things like that. And then you learn about his family, and then I had later on in the week, you'll see his college teammate and his best friend is Kevin Warren, who's the coach at Georgetown, and I had him surprise jump into the interview, and that would be cool to air too. So they're all a little different, but the more that I do those, the better I am at actually being a game analyst, because I always find ways naturally when I'm not thinking about it to tell those stories that deserve to be humanized before analyzed.
Yeah. So talking about Through the X, the one you did with Jules, I saw you had a sick pair of Jordan Off-White ones. Where did the shoe obsession come from?
Oh, I wish you would have told me, man. I would have gone out into the garage and showed you. The shoe
collection's in the garage?
Yeah, but I have them on racks.
Okay.
Yeah, they're all racked. I'm a neat freak, man. I'm a neat freak. I'm definitely anal retentive. Yeah, they're all and they're categorized by high tops, low tops. I got them. It's dialed in. Yeah, I don't have I definitely have enough closet space, but I also have a bunch of dress shoes too. So dress shoes live in my closet in my bedroom. Sneakers, and that goes for the kids too. My kids have racks. Don't come in the house with dirty shoes on. Put it on the rack. We're beat it. So the shoe obsession. To me, I look at it this way: you could have the sickest suit in the world. If you have bad shoes and a bad belt, you look like a clown.
Brutal.
You could have a bad suit, okay, that just it fits okay, but it's not like a high-end suit with the Yeah, you just get, you get a suit that fits you and you spent no money on it. If you have a sick belt and sick shoes, you'll win the day, right? So, to me, I've always felt like your shoes are really, really important when you're dressed up, when you're dressed down. And the fact of the matter is, I wear jeans, I wear hoodies a lot, and I feel like if I have a nice pair of sneakers on, it's gonna work. So I've always loved them, and then as I got older, actually, I started getting more and more into shoes. So I have, man, if I didn't give the ones that I was done and over with, and I don't beat up the shoes, I give them to my brothers and my friends. I'd have a ton of shoes, but I like to keep it tight, man. I don't want 500 shoes. I want 25 really good ones, and then when a new one comes in, I'm pitching an old one.
You ever thought about kind of doing a tour of your collection? Because I feel like the fans would love that.
Yeah, I mean, I would do it. So I have multiple Off-White Jordan 1s. I got the Travis Scotts. I got the Jordan Cements. I've got so many Dunks. I got some good ones, man.
That's cool to hear.
I'll send you some pictures.
That's sick, because my dad doesn't know anything about shoes and swag like that. He's so old money, and it's cool to hear you have 44.
But he's wearing a blazer and khakis and penny loafers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't do that. I'm at the age I probably should, but who's to tell me because I'm 44 I can't wear a pair of basketball sneakers. You know what I like too? I like the Nike Blazers. I got a couple custom ones of those. Those are cool. Yeah, the sneakers to me are, they always have to be really, really clean. One thing that I won't get, you won't find me oftentimes finding a pair of sneakers that the bottom of the sole is white. I'm not down with that because that gets
What about the gross. Icy sole? The you don't like that?
Not
it
too
gets
much,
yellow.
Man. Yeah, it gets yellow. So I'll look at the bottom of the soles. The side of the sole could be white. I'm totally cool with that. I cleaned that up. But if the bottom of the sole is white, that gets all gets all skunky.
You ever rock a suit with some Jordans or no? If it's suit, it's got to be dress shoes.
Yeah, a suit would be dress shoes, but I would wear I would do blazer with a pair of pants and a pair of sneakers for sure.
Nice.
I've done that. I did that this year with the Nike Blazers. I definitely would wear a pair of sneakers with a pair of dress shoes, jeans, and a blazer type thing, but never with a suit. No, a suit, no way.
Okay, so kind of going back to the recruiting aspect, do you think so I'm 20 now. If I had kids in like 15 years, do you think when my kids will have when they have the opportunity to go through the recruiting process, do you think Pac-12 and SEC schools will have Division I lacrosse?
Wow, it's a great question. If you asked me that question like 6 months ago or a year ago, I'd probably be really bullish on it. I just don't know what the back end of this is going to look like, right? Like, I just think there's going to be a lot of situations where athletic departments might not have the budget in 2 years that they thought they would, right? Like when they were projecting a 5-year plan a couple years ago, there might have been, and I don't have any like real knowledge of this. I'm just as a human and observing what's going on in the world right now. I feel like athletics is a lot like every other business. I don't think there's going to be an influx of spending. I think the purse is going to be smaller, and people are going to be less inclined to spend. But I think the focus is going to be more on like cutting costs and saving. I would hope by the time that your kids are up in the ranks and ready to ball in college that the world will be certainly back. And I'm hoping the world's back in no time, man. I'm a very optimistic person, like I said, and I want greatness for the sport of lacrosse. I want exposure. You told me the Pac-12 and the SEC were getting into lacrosse. I'd be the happiest guy around. I just think in the next few years that's going to be really tough because I think that the fallout of all of this is going to put some strain on some budgets. But I would say 5, 10, 15 years. Let's think that things could be in a totally different realm than today in 2020. But I think it was trending that way, Mitch, for certain. Like if you look at, Michigan came to the forefront 7, 8 years ago, and then Utah. And I say Michigan and Utah because those are big conference schools. Like as great as it is that like High Point, Furman, and Richmond all came to Division I lacrosse, and it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. When a Michigan who's in the Big Ten or a Utah who's in the Pac-12, when they decide to get in lacrosse, that tells me something. It allows the Big Ten just to go after one affiliate member to have a real conference, right? And Johns Hopkins is an affiliate member. You have five legit all-sport members of the Big Ten, and then Johns Hopkins, who's there just for lacrosse. So now you have a real conference. Utah in the Pac-12, as hard as it is for Utah to get into men's lacrosse, that second and third school will be just as hard, if not harder. And once that comes to fruition, I think you're going to see a snowball effect. It's like the women's lacrosse. They have a legit full Pac-12, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Arizona State, Oregon, Stanford, USC, they have women's lacrosse. That's amazing for a young girl to be able to think, like, I have a daughter who's 10 and she's super into lax, and like if she's good enough one day and she can think about West Coast schools, I mean, how awesome is that for a kid?
Yeah, that's sweet. And if that happens, or maybe when, do you think these blue chip schools like Maryland and Hopkins will still be top tier schools?
I do. Like, I think what you'll see like, a program like Maryland who went to 7 of the last 10 Final Fours. They're not going anywhere. Just like Alabama football doesn't go anywhere. But the level of dominance is a lot harder to achieve. And we've seen it in recent years. When I was at Syracuse, I was in the middle of a run of 22 straight Final Fours. Yeah. As crazy as that sounds, our teams never would have been able to pull that off in today's day and age. Never. Like, you would have gotten tripped up, every couple of years. And just, there's no way that would have happened. So we've already seen it. But Syracuse will always have tradition. Just like Ohio State has tradition in football, and Stanford has tradition in volleyball, and Arizona State has wrestling or swimming or whatever. Like those programs don't change. Oklahoma State wrestling, like you could find schools in every sport. In hockey, the Wisconsins of the world, and Michigan, like those schools have always had great hockey programs. I think like lacrosse-wise, Maryland's not going anywhere. But if we have West Coast schools like Stanford and USC and men's lacrosse, is Maryland going to get 7 out of 10 Final Fours? Probably not. They'll get tripped up more. Maybe a good deal for them would be 4 out of 10, right? Because you're going to have to find room for some of these programs. Because if Stanford and USC get men's lacrosse, I mean, they're going to attract high-end type coaches. Recruits are going to want to go there, just like they want to go there for USC women's lacrosse. I mean, they've had the number one recruit in the country attend their school before in women's lacrosse. So, like, you're going to get that. And look, I sit here as a Syracuse lacrosse fan. We've been to one Final Four in 10 years. You know, like, I'm a realist knowing that like, that's still not good enough, right? Like, that's not good enough. And I think every kid on the team would tell you the same thing. But I'm realistic to think that, like, the 22 straight in a row, like, some of my buddies are totally lost, that they think they should be in the Final Four every year. Like, why aren't we winning championships? Like, hello, look at the landscape. But, you know, one is a little light. Like, it should be 2 or 3 maybe.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. So kind of working towards our last segment here called Quick Talk on Pelk Talk. I'm going to give you a short word or phrase, and you're going to give me a quick response.
Cool.
You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. First one, food.
Meatballs.
Your 4 Mount Rushmore broadcasters ever.
Ooh, I like that. I'm going to go with Keith Jackson. Oh, Nelly. I love Vern Lundquist, man. I thought he was so good. A 4th one. Man, 4th one. I'm going to go a little off the grid just because I think this guy is who he is from an authentic standpoint. I think Dickie V, man. I got to get
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
I got to get Dickie V because honestly, like, I've worked with people who work with him. He's the same person in life, and that means a lot to me.
That's awesome. Okay, next one. Worst lacrosse saying.
Let's see. Worst lacrosse saying. Step to greatness by Quint. The extra step to greatness. And you know why? Because I actually applaud him. I think it's kind of a cool term, but so many people have ripped it off that it's just.
If not Syracuse, then.
North Carolina.
Most underrated lacrosse player ever.
Rob Cavavit. I mentioned him earlier. I grew up with him. We were teammates and co-captains. One of 4 players in Cuse with 125 goals, 120 assists. The other 3 are the 3 Powells. So enough said. Because you probably don't know who Rob Cavavit is, do you?
Yeah, no, I don't.
There you go.
Biggest chirper you've ever played against?
I would say Dan Radaball from Maryland. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Brian Doherty, the goalie from Maryland. Out of control, man. Out of control.
Favorite team to broadcast?
Well, I love going back to the Dome, but my favorite team to broadcast, I kind of like Yale now.
Really?
Yeah, because they chirp a little. There's something to them.
Yeah. Oh, my God.
Edge.
Every guy I've had on here said that.
Said Yale? The Yale
said
chirps?
Yale chirps. Oh, my God.
Oh, Yale chirps. But I just kind of like how they're kind of defying the whole Ivy mantra. You know, Cuse will always be, but I kind of have to go in a different direction there. Like, I like being at Cuse, but I like calling Yale. I love going down to Raleigh-Durham too. Carolina and Duke are fun.
Favorite person to broadcast a game with?
Mike Golick Jr.
Favorite pair of shoes you own?
I'm really into the Travis Scott Jordan 1s I have. Yeah. I really like those. The color, everything. It just work. They work for me.
Last question. You're 44 now. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
5 years. Hopefully I'm doing the same thing I'm doing, because I feel like in life that you should only do stuff that you want, because I'm at the halfway point, man. If I live to 90, that would be pretty sweet. But I think I want to be doing the same thing, but I want to reinvent myself in terms of the way that I tell stories and the way that I get behind athletes.
Sweet. Well, that's it here, folks, on Pelk Talk. My guy, Paul Carcaterra, thanks for showing out. Where can the fans find you at? They can find me on Twitter at Paul Carcaterra, and Instagram's the same thing, man. My Instagram and Twitter game it's just okay. It's not like yours or anything, but we'll keep plugging away. I'm gonna try to stay young. There we go. I love that. Well, you guys can find this as a YouTube video, which you're probably watching right now, or as a podcast at the podcast app for Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, every podcast app. But that's a wrap here, Paul. I really appreciate you coming out again.
Yeah, that was fun, man. We'll do it again.